The knitting project was called I Heart King's Cross, and we applied with this idea because council wanted to do a community-based artwork in King's Cross this year for Art and About. So we applied with this idea because we'd seen a bit of the guerrilla knitting, which is a sort of a movement that's taking the world by storm. And there's a local guerrilla knitter in Sydney called Denise Litchfield who's been doing it for a while. And we'd been wanting to do a knitting project for a while, and so it just all kind of came together at the right time. So the idea was to have knitting circles in King's Cross and to try and make enough fabric that we could cover as many public objects as we could in the King's Cross area. We sort of saw it as a bit of a metaphor for a celebration of the diverse community that is there. So making a very colourful social fabric in a sense, and getting as many people from there to contribute their piece or their individuality to this large communal fabric.
But this one very much was about bringing together in the end over 200 members of the community. So all of a sudden this bit of colour out the front of their apartment building is a catalyst for them to actually start to engage and meet with each other, which is and that was really, certainly that was something which the city wanted to try and bring out in an artwork, and certainly that was something that we were, I guess, very conscious of as we started planning the work. So I think that's certainly where we're interested in working on public artworks, I think, is things that have a very, I don't know if easy is the right word, but there certainly is this accessibility to them so that people can find a point of engagement with the work. We got started working on public art projects after running an artist run space for a few years in the early noughties called Not Gallery.
Something that we were particularly fascinated with when we were running Not Gallery was engaging non-traditional art audiences. Yeah, from there an invitation came through for us to apply for the Albion Place window box display. So we applied for that in 2007, which was a year after our space had closed.
In a way there was this sort of intermediary kind of zone where we were doing a lot of work at festivals, music festivals both in Sydney and out of town. There was almost a year or two of that, which was, and that continued after the work with the City of Sydney, but that was kind of really good almost as a bit of a road test where it's kind of public and you kind of got a captive audience, but you can sort of experiment a bit more without necessarily sort of putting yourself right out there on the street and in a public square kind of environment.
Yeah, it's right, it was a road test. Yeah.
I guess working collaboratively with other artists is it's a really sensitive kind of thing to do, really, because everyone comes at it from their own different perspective and own background. Everyone's got their own things that they want to get out of a project. Whether or not that's sort of general career stuff, if it's more publicity stuff, if it's just expression. As the sort of curators or the when you're sort of managing and directing these people, you kind of got to be really flexible and accommodating and understand that, well, you can write the most comprehensive schedule and the most comprehensive plans for anything, but guarantee that 5 minutes into anything starting, it's going to be off schedule, and you kind of got to just improvise it and accept that that's it's a really beautiful part of the project.
Alasdair's amazingly well organised. Like, we wouldn't have been able to do any of these projects if it weren't for him, because he writes a really good risk assessment, which is something that you need to do for public artwork. You need a really good risk assessment.
And not just for the not just to get the tick of approval from whoever's paying for it. You just need to kind of do it just for your own peace of mind, because if you put something out there in the public space and there's something you haven't thought about and it happens and it transpires that someone gets hit on the head, and maybe they just get a bump, and that's really good in a way, because they might also die. So you just got to kind of It's this big sense of responsibility.
Yeah,
really.
you have to be really oh&s savvy.
Before you actually get onto the site to install the work, you need to have gone through in your head and thought about you need to, if it's a 1 week installation, you need to start at 7 AM on Monday, and you need to work through every minute of the day or every hour of the day, and detail what's going on. Not so much because you do need that list, it is really handy to have that list, but you need to have actually gone through and done the whole installation before you actually get there, so you know that you haven't missed anything. As if you get to the end of day 5 and realise that, well, you know, the piece of equipment that you needed you actually sent home 3 days before, then you're not going to be able to finish it. So it's just a matter of living before it happens.
Yeah, which is a really difficult thing to do. I've had a lot of trouble with that about public art. It's kind of like you have to make the work before it's made, because you sort of have to cover all bases, and especially when it's a work for council like we've done, where they need to approve everything before it happens. It's incredibly difficult. It's taken me a while to be able to do that. A good thing to do is probably just to go and, if you're about to do a public artwork, is to go and monitor that area, you know, over lots of different times. So in the daytime, in the nighttime, on a weekend, on a weekday, and just see how people are in that space, how they use it anyway. Like, is it a thoroughfare? Is it a meeting point? What do people do in this space already? And what will they do once there's something there?
You need to be aware of not just what you're doing, you need to be very aware of the greater area of the precinct in which you're going.
Yeah, and how it's potentially going to affect that area. And if that's going to be negative for some people who use it, how to get around that.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I was going to say, just communicate. Like, you'd need to be able to communicate really effectively to a lot of different people. If you're completely down one side of the creative spectrum where you're completely ideas based and don't think you're very practical at all, or if you're completely practical and pragmatic, but you kind of don't let yourself get completely loose and creative, then start working with some other people.
If I had done something in a gallery, I may not. It's quite difficult to get feedback sometimes, you know, and to have such immediate feedback is really rewarding.
I think the rewarding thing about public art isn't that different to other forms, but as Michelle says, it's not so forthcoming in a gallery context.
Rather than reinterpreting an environment, you're affecting the immediate environment, and that's really fascinating, you know, and it's about making the world a place that you actually want to live in. Know your own process of making an artwork, and mine is to be quite fiddly and move things around and stuff. And so to be able to apply that process to public art, I use, you know, a computer to digitally make the work before it's made, and that way I can fiddle with it, so that when it goes up, I'm happy with it. That would be my tip. Just know your process and adapt that process somehow to the process of making a public artwork.
Yeah, I think my tip really shows up the difference between what Michelle focuses on in the projects and what I focus on in the projects. My tip I picked up in a little seminar at the Underbelly Arts Festival a year or two ago, and it's common sense, but a public artwork will have a budget, and you're going to need to go through and you're going to itemise exactly what you're going to spend, and you're going to be completely airy-fairy for your initial submission, and then as soon as you start going, that's going to start changing, and as you move closer and closer to installing your artwork, you're going to open that budget up, if not every day, if you're not doing it every day, but on a regular basis. In the knitting project in the Cross, I've probably made revisions to that budget maybe 20 or 30 times, and most of that's been in the last 2.5 weeks as we approach the installation. And even every day after the installation, you suddenly go, oh, we had to spend $200 there. Do we actually have that money? Well, yeah, and you find a way to do it. Because it's really painful if you go even 10% over budget, because that might cost you $3,000 or $5,000. And if you're the council or the company who's supporting the work doesn't have that money, then you're going to have to foot the bill yourself if you spent the money. So
or
yeah,
compromise the
watch your budget. I think that's a good tip.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And have some contingency. Always allow contingency. Yeah.
Don't spend it unless you have to.